The police, it seemed to me, at least in the part that was open to cameras, were using quite a bit of restraint. And there was one thing about the police operation that was very curious to me, that they went into to an operation without helmets on their heads. Most of them that seemed injured seemed to be having bloody faces, hit with bottles, hit with pipes, hit with acid in their faces. Why would the police make a decision to send them in without helmets?
I think generally speaking, the police wanted to send a message that they were trying to do this as calmly, as professionally, as with as much restraint as possible. And so I think they wanted to avoid the image of people in full riot gear. In terms of if that was a good measure, considering the fact that there was while it wasn't necessarily indicative of what happened over the course of that entire day, because for the most part it wasn't particularly violent. Most of the people were taken out, well, maybe with a little bit of a you have to drag them out, but not with serious blows. But still, I think if I'm a police officer, that is definitely a question that I'd want to have: is why did we go somewhere that's potentially violent when we were not? I mean, they had supplies, they had gear with them, just not necessarily on their person the whole time. I'm sure that a lot of conversation within the police went into that, of how much do police officers care? Are they going to be unarmed? Are they going to have batons but not their firearms? Things like that.
About the firearms.
And in terms of that, it was all told, not necessarily everybody who was inside of Amona, but all told, the police operation involved something like 3,000 officers. And the vast majority of them were unarmed in terms of both firearms and like batons or any plastic riot gear. And then a small handful of more senior officers had their sidearms, and then there was, I think, one or two people who had assault rifles on their backs in case something really escalated. That were sort of walking around, not really taking part in any of the evacuations themselves, but were just sort of on call if, heaven forbid, things escalated in that way.
So finally on this subject, some people say that there's a very serious double standard in terms of how the security forces will treat the removal of Jewish homes in a settlement, in an illegal outpost, and how they would treat, for example, demolitions in a Bedouin Israeli town, or how they would deal with other similar type of security situations. Is that the case?
I think it's easy to just say the police do it this way and that way, and there's the only reason why the police didn't go in with full riot gear into Amona is because these were Jews. I think that's a little bit too simplistic. I think that the reason why they did that was because there was, ahead of time, huge amounts of dialogue between the police and the protest organizers and the residents, that there was that connection and that both sides had a clear understanding of, we don't want this to get out of hand, we're going to be, we're going to protest, but we're going to do it non-violently, and if somebody gets violent, we're going to stop them, and that did happen. I mean, you can argue about, in terms of it being a play, in terms of did they have, when the police were walking up, did they send a couple of kids to go and throw rocks in order to stop them? Or did the kids just want to go out and throw rocks and they actually did stop them? I'm not going to wade into that on a cynical level, but there was very clearly when someone would say something to a police officer that was out of line, it was as often the protest organizers that were the ones that said, don't say that. That's not okay. You crossed the line. It's okay to make them feel guilty, but
you got to stay within the script.
But you have to. So there was one. I remember one thing that struck me was there was a black police officer who was part of the operation, and somebody said, "Would you do this to an Ethiopian family?" And immediately one of the protest organizers were like, "Don't say that. That's not okay. Stop. Shut up." He quieted that down because that clearly crossed the line of being inappropriate and being, not just us protesting, but us saying things that are, racial and insensitive. And so I think that's an element of it that is easy to get lost. The better question is, why then aren't those kinds of conversations happening between, the leadership in a Bedouin town ahead of an evacuation there?